first image that comes to mind when the sweatshop topic is brought into conversation is workers cramped into a small factory with no heating or air conditioning and working 12 long-hour shifts. This is obviously a sad and depressing image to have, and unfortunately is as close to reality of it as you can get without having been to one. These workers are denied their basic working rights and work ridiculously long hours for less pay than you'd imagine. The company then reaps all of the extra profit as they have significantly reduced their costs, and these sweatshops workers see none of it. It's hardly the dream job we all hope for, but unfortunately, for some people, it's the only option they have. The saddest fact about these sweatshops is that these workers are grateful for the little income, and they do it with little to no complaints because they have to feed themselves and feed their families. For many children as young as 5, being a sweatshop worker is a necessity in order to ensure that their family can survive each week. This is where the conflict of interest comes in for many people. Isn't it true that maybe these workers would be in a worse position or jobs like Nike had not hired them for less than minimum wage? Aren't there more dangerous jobs they would have to resort to, such as prostitution and crime, to put food on the table? The answer is yes to both of these questions. If it wasn't for sweatshops, then there would be many more unemployed people hitting rock bottom to feed their children or siblings. If sweatshops were banned completely, a lot of people would have their only route out of poverty taken away from them. Sweatshops can be a life-saving income for the workers. It's just that the organization itself reaps the most profit. Pros to the uses of sweatshops would be reduced costs, easy to fire or replace, different time zones, only option for them to survive, and more workers working longer hours. A few cons to the use of sweatshops would be bad and unsafe work conditions, small wages, very young children working long hours, no benefits, and forced into so they're unwilling to put in full effort. Do you know how much money the people earn in a sweatshop?
It's gonna be less than minimum wage. I'd say $3 an hour.
Do you know any companies that use sweatshops?
I don't know any, but I've heard that like big companies such as like Nike or Disney, like fast food restaurants like McDonald's, they use like a lot of sweatshops.
Out of the companies you just named, what are some of the items you think they make in sweatshops?
Well, for Disney, they probably make a whole bunch of stuffed animals in sweatshops. And for like McDonald's or something, they probably use sweatshops to construct all their Happy Meal toys.
Did you know children as young as 5 work in sweatshops?
No, I didn't, but it sounds scary and I would not want to be in there. It's scary to hear that kids in there.
What do you think working conditions are like?
Long hours, dirty, sweaty, tons of bugs, hot.
What do you think of when you hear sweatshops?
Sweaty, shops, long hours, dirty, clean, but not clean, and muddy.
Can you explain to me what a sweatshop is?
From my understanding, it's something that's usually a lot of times overseas. I know there are some in the United States. It's where people work really long hours for very low wages, working for companies so they can pay hundreds of people very small amounts of money to make more money on top of them. It's not safe conditions usually. They work from 6 in the morning till midnight. I saw one time on the news that then they do overtime till 3 or 4 in the morning. So there's not much sleep. It doesn't seem very sanitary.
If the sweatshops went away, where would these people work?
I don't know. I would think that it keeps them off the streets, helps their families survive. They could possibly be put into the sex trade, children's slavery type stuff, a lot of prostitution, drugs. So it's not to say that it's a safe, but it keeps them off the streets and working and hopefully helping their family survive and eat.
If these were your options, where would you rather work?
Well, of course, the sweatshop, even though that's a horrible place, but you're going to make some money to help your family eat. You're probably amongst some friends or neighbors. So both situations are horrible, but I would choose the sweatshop over being on the street or obviously prostitution or the sex trade. So sweatshop, I would have to choose.
Overall, I've learned a lot from what I've discovered about sweatshops. I've learned that sweatshops generally use untrained, cheap labor to manufacture merchandise. These laborers sometimes do include children, and conditions in the shops are horrible compared to what conditions in the United States. These countries usually have no laws governing workers' rights, labor laws, and child labor. There is a lot of discrimination and abusive beating happening that they cannot do anything about. The factories generally include long hours, very cramped working spaces, bad equipment, and poor treatment of their employees. For most of them, this is their only option, or they would end up starving to death, become street vagrants, or some of them go into sex slave or sex trafficking industries. Workers here generally can't afford the merchandise they are making because they are buying the necessities they need to survive.